Good morning. So, we will continue with what Rick Altman has been telling us, a list of 10 defining features of a genre. So, we ended up how genres cater to certain expectations, and Rick Altman, according to Rick Altman, producers, readers and critics all share the same interest in genre. Now, this is an interesting idea that readers are not just readers, but also the audience we are talking about if film is considered a text. So, producers, not just readers or the audience who wait for a particular kind of a movie to come along, but it is also the producers who are highly interested in genres. Now, can you give me some examples? What kind of genres would producers be interested in? Well, high concept cinema.
Yeah.
Are we talking about that? Get me George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, and you have a movie. But yeah, if you look at a highest cinema like Oceans series, this would be a typical genre that producers would be interested in. A superhero movie, yeah, that's another genre that producers would like to have. But how many producers do you think will be very enthusiastic to finance a film like Fargo? Or not many, or The Big Lebowski, or A Serious Man, or even A Single Man. Single Man, are you aware of Single Man?
Colin Firth.
Colin
Yeah.
Firth, and it is directed by the fashion designer Tom Ford. It's a very fashion conscious kind of a film. But how many people would be interested in those kinds of movies? Not many producers. So, it's not impossible to have a punch drunk love. Okay, we do find something like The Master. We do find occasionally something like Fight Club or a Fargo. Okay, so Coen brothers, what? No Country for Old Men. What do? They subvert the expectations that we have of a Western. Consider both No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood. 2007 movies starring one stars Daniel Day-Lewis, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. One stars Javier Bardem and Tommy Lee Jones and Josh Brolin. Okay, directed by the Coen brothers, based on a great novel, very successful novel by Cormac McCarthy. Now, what happens to what generic expectations are they fulfilling here? These are the westerns.
Sugar leaves.
No, I am asking about, are they fulfilling the expectations? There are producers, there are audiences, there are critics, they expect something in a genre. Yeah.
Hero dies and
The hero dies, the so-called hero dies.
Yeah.
The voice of reason, the rational voice, it's quiet in, that is Tommy Lee Jones. He accepts defeats. He accepts that he is tired and can get no longer go on. Okay. Even the wife, who is the only noble character in the movie apart from the sheriff. Okay, there are not many characters in the film. Have you noticed that? In No Country for Old Men, it's not populated with people. The setting is sparse and the characters are also minimum. They keep it to the minimum. Dialogue is minimalistic. So, it's a very minimalistic kind of movies in many ways. But the best person, human being in the movie, Llewellyn's wife, she is killed off for no reason. Okay, why does he kill her? Is he out on a revenge? He has already killed off her husband.
Fate.
Yeah, it's her fate to die. Okay, so what is he then? The villain becomes the messenger of death, maybe Satan himself. Maybe he personifies a walking evil through the deserts. Who knows? So, it subverts, in other ways, both these movies subvert the expectations of a conventional Western. There is no hero, there is no sanity, there is no affirmative consequential model anymore. Remember, that's what we expect in a typical genre, cause effect logic, but these two movies defy every logic. So, why did critics go overboard in praising both No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood? Between these two movies, they won all the Academy Awards in 2008. Why did he? I mean, Javier Bardem got for the best supporting actor, Day-Lewis won it for the best acting. No Country for Old Men was also the best movie that year. Why? What makes for this kind of a phenomenal popularity among the audience as well as among the critics? Because they defied genres. Okay. And it is up to us how, as consumers, how much we want to take. And after that, did you notice that there has been no conventional Western? Yeah?
True Grit.
Yeah, but True Grit is a remake,
Yeah.
and then again, remakes have their own lives. Okay, at one level, these movies also generated interest in the Western as a genre. Okay, so the audiences were ready. 3:10 to Yuma, yes. So I think 3:10 to Yuma came a little before these two movies.
Return to Yama also is a remake.
Is also a remake, yes. So on one hand we are having remakes of very successful popular westerns, or we are having completely subverting westerns. So it's a very interesting. After Public Enemies and after The Town, did we have any very popular gangster? I'm talking more basically interested in the Western and the gangster because they are typical Hollywood products. Musicals and romantic comedies are common in every country. But can you give me one single example of a very celebrated gangster movie after Johnny Depp's and Michael Mann's Public Enemies?
There were some, but I don't think they were very celebrated.
Yes. We aren't even aware of most of these films. In our country, I mean, gangster has been a very popular genre in our country as well. Why do you think in India we don't have the Western? Let me tell you, we never have had that Western culture, the typical Western hero culture in our country. Although our landscape can also give encouragement to that kind of a plot. But we never had a very successful example of a Western, except Sholay is often cited, but then it's a curry. Like in the West, we have the spaghetti version, we have the curry Western in the form of Sholay. But then it's a mishmash of many things that we have already talked about, the strong emotional connect, that is the kind of characters that we had in Sholay. So that made for its popularity, that accounted for its phenomenal popularity. But gangster, yes, we do have. Why do you think gangster heroes are so popular with us?
They subvert authority in.
Exactly. We always need a hero in our country or in any country. It's a very universal need to have a hero who subverts authority. At the same time, comes along a musical and a family drama. Family drama is quite peculiar to Asian cinema. Okay, I don't think in European cinema or in Hollywood's brand of cinema we have this genre of family dramas. Maybe they have melodramas of another kind, but not these joint family sagas. हम साथ साथ हैं, हम आपके हैं कौन, the mother of all musicals and family dramas. Are you aware of these movies? Yeah, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. It's a love story, but with a strong overdose of family. So it's a family drama. The boy isn't out there just to win over the girl. He has to win over the entire family. Yeah. So we have a very strong, we have our own category of musicals and family dramas. But at the same time, we also have gangster heroes. So, the hero in a family drama upholds traditions. The hero in gangster cinema subverts traditions. And what are we witnessing right now in our country? Mostly remakes. We were just talking about Himmatwala. Himmatwala is being remade.
Zanjeer.
We are having Zanjeer, yes, but Zanjeer is yet to come out. But then we have already seen a very successful Bodyguard, which is a remake of one of our own other Indian languages movie, right? And then we have also have example of something like Singham, and then Dabangg was so phenomenally successful that it spawned off a sequel as well. Yeah, so that these heroes are not upholding family values. At the same time, they are not subverting authorities. Am I right? What are we getting? What kind of heroes are we witnessing at the moment?
Kind of mixed.
Mixed. Maybe we are still a society in transition, okay, and we do have a tendency to lap up those kinds of films which are mass entertainers. Ready, for example, is it a family drama? To an extent. It's a musical to an extent. Yeah, hero, he subverts as well as upholds. Yeah, so it's a mixed kind of a hero we are witnessing.
So he is the authority, but at the same time he's unorthodox.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's very unorthodox. So we have that kind of see, the idea of having a corrupt cop is nothing new to cinema. Amitabh Bachchan's Zanjeer was an individual against society. He was a product of a certain kind of socio-political context. Amitabh Bachchan's Diwar was a response to certain kind of a political situation in India. Okay, we also have post-colonial cinema, that is something, a vast area in itself. When India was just out of the colonial regime, and then how did our cinema respond to the changing facets of society in that period? So that's another category in itself. Rick Altman talks about genre, and he says that not much attention has been paid to genres as history. The question of generic history has not been satisfactorily answered. If it's the case in Hollywood, then the need is more acutely felt in our country, because we don't know that how many genres exist. No one has done a very critical study of genres in our country, in our cinema. At the most, we have these mixed masala kind of films, okay, where everything is mixed, and we are served a kind of a potpourri of many genres. But this is not the kind of genre bending that Tarantino indulges in. It's something like giving the audience a dish, and where there is something for everyone. So genres can never be neutral categories. If it's a genre, then it has to have a category, otherwise you become Big Lebowski or you become Fargo. Now coming to this popular category, gangster cinema. So we are talking about genre, and gangster is a very popular genre. American Gangster, we had a very good example, a successful example, Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. So one of the most identifiable genre from Hollywood cinema, interestingly, the gangster cinema or the genre was a precursor to the film noir. Historically, it was influenced by two socio-economic forces. One is prohibition, 1919 to 1933, and the Great Depression, 1929 to 34. I was just talking about Once Upon a Time in America. It combines the two events. Okay. the heroes are a product, the gangster heroes are a product of the Prohibition as well as the Great Depression era. And interestingly, once upon a time in America, those heroes are not Italian Americans, those Italian Americans, they are Jewish immigrants. So, the 20s and the 30s, historically speaking, the Prohibition in 1919 played an important role in bringing the underworld into national prominence. We had regional or big city gangs. So, we had gangs of all kinds. I mean, if you watch Bruce Willis's Last Man Standing, again it is set in during the Prohibition period, and it is a small town. So, most of these gangs, they belong to ethnic and immigrant groups, you already know what we are talking about, which took charge of the illicit liquor trade, Al Capone basically, most famously. The gangs quickly grew powerful and they controlled first neighborhoods and then entire cities. So, they would start off small in ghettos, and then soon they would be fighting rival gangs for domination. Sometimes even the government, they had their one foot very firmly planted in all decision making, among all decision making authorities as well. Some of the leading gangsters, and you will find these characters very often in cinema. Al Capone, who was nicknamed Scarface, and they had very interesting names: Lucky Luciano, Legs Diamond, Pretty Boy Floyd, who makes an appearance in Public Enemies, Babyface Nelson, in Once Upon a Time in America, De Niro's character is called Noodles. And you have Bonnie and Clyde, of course, immortalized by Warren Beatty, Machine Gun Kelly, Ma Barker's gang, Alvin Creepy Karpis, and then we had John Dillinger, who had almost like a movie star fan following. When he was shot dead on the streets, okay, some people even collected his blood, which was still fresh on the pavement. He had that kind of fan following, because as you rightly pointed out, what did he symbolize? Subversion of authority. People were sick of this government, but here there was someone who had risen from ashes to such great heights, and he died quite young. John Dillinger happens to be quite an interesting character, 1903 to 34, so he died at age 31, and ironically he loved gangster films, and the last movie that he watched was Manhattan Melodrama, starring William Powell and Clark Gable. And very interestingly, the movie was co-written by Joseph Mankiewicz, who later went on, he became a big director, a hotshot director, a big time screenwriter. He directed the Oscar winning movie All About Eve, Joseph Mankiewicz. So, Manhattan Melodrama, in which Clark Gable plays a gangster, and at the end he is sent to the electric chair. And while in hiding, John Dillinger decided to watch a movie, and the FBI is tipped off, and then he is shot dead right outside the theater. Theater is Biograph in Chicago, and he was gunned down by the agents, and this was the end of the crime wave of the 30s. It was almost like closing of an era in American history. These people, collectively known as or called by the FBI as public enemies, they were held responsible for heists, bank jobs, kidnappings and killings, and of course bootlegging and illicit liquor dealing. So, what was the upshot of John Dillinger's killing? I mean, there were gangster movies even before, but what happened once John Dillinger was shot dead? Cinema started almost like deifying these people. So, they were not, gangster movies weren't just uh, entertainment flicks anymore, but they became something more serious. The gangster hero became a corruptive, yes, corruptive force, yet at the same time he also symbolized a revolutionary. He became a revolutionary force, subverting the authority. Popular morality, he questioned and interrogated popular morality and redefined popular culture. So, gangster cinema of Hollywood and the Hays Code declaring war on crime movies. We were talking about classic Hollywood. So, they had declared war on excessive sex and violence in cinema, and these things became a critical influence on the course of American cinema for decades to come. The gangster heroes were glamorized by the media. Sensational and juicy stories were written about these people. The public adored them, most importantly. They were looked upon as classic American hero, almost like that lone ranger who rises from rags to riches, symbolizing the elusive American dream. America is a land of opportunities. And very interestingly, these reporters and journalists who chronicled their lives, the lives of these gangsters, later went on to become successful screenwriters. So, you see, they have had first hand experience with these people. Some of them had even interviewed these real life gangsters. So, therefore, that touch of authenticity was almost there, was always there. So, gangsterism and gangster cinema parallels the concept of American dream. The myth is America is a democratic, classless society. The reality is there are deep social divisions even in the American society, and the gangsters or the gangster heroes, they become fundamental in a socio-cultural upheaval. They are the people who can bring a revolution, a change. Even someone from the slums can rise up. You look at a movie like Scarface, Tony Montana. Who is he? He is an illegal immigrant to America. He does not even hold the green card. He kills a man to acquire his green card, remember? And then his subsequent rise to unimaginable wealth and success. So, the gangster hero causes a subversion of traditional values, yes. Now, major screenwriters of this period: Joseph Mankiewicz, who made Manhattan Melodrama; W.R. Burnett, screenwriter for Little Caesar; and Ben Hecht, who was never interested in writing about conventional heroes and heroines, but focused generally only about the so-called anti-heroes. Hecht wrote Underworld in 1927 for Paramount Pictures, a contemporary tale of big city gangster called Bullweed. So, typical qualities of a gangster hero, we are still talking about genre, a typical genre. So, a typical gangster hero, and we were Sandeep, if you would just remember, we were talking about describable and observable types. So, this is the quality of a gangster hero, and please apply it to our Satya, our once upon a time in Mumbai hero, our company hero, and our hero from Diwar. Okay. Don't think of Shah Rukh's Don. It's a very glamorized version, okay, very post-liberalized version of gangsterism. We are talking about a typical gangster hero from our country, invariably from the proletariat class, who accesses wealth by stealing. Yes, he does not follow the rules, he need not follow the rules, he always takes the crooked path. He embodies the contradiction in any society. I mean, you look at a gangster hero in any society, and what we are told, that whenever there is a discrepancy in any society, there would be the growth in the underworld. I mean, do you know Russia is known for its underworld and its mafia? Why? I mean, you would think that a country which so prides itself on its socialist and communist ideology, why would such a society have discrepancy, and why would such a society have would witness growth of this kind of culture?
Actually, like that, it's only on the surface.
It's only on the surface. The so-called equality and so-called socialism is only on the surface. The rich in Russia are really rich, unbelievably rich. Okay, so whenever there is a society where there is a big or huge chasm between the poor and the very rich, there is always a space for the growth of this anti-hero. And this anti-hero becomes iconoclastic, you know, he is defying the rules, he is defying the existing traditions and value system. Okay, therefore, he is a hero after all, however anti, however negative, but he is still a hero. An ordinary man would root for this hero because he is one of us and not that super rich and super wealthy person. Robin Hood, okay, it's always a take on the Robin Hood version, the Robin Hood legend. So, ideologically, yes, his death is necessary to restore the so-called calm in our society. He has to die because he has broken so many rules. So, he has to die. But while he is alive, people root for him. I stand corrected. Do you have anything to add here?
Movies like Godfather, he doesn't die because of his lifestyle. He dies for natural causes. Like, he just has a heart attack and dies. But
Yes.
his sons die as a result of violence.
Yes,
Like,
his sons died as a result of that. So, early gangster films, and this is important to note, most of these films are produced by the Warner Brothers. We are discussing classic Hollywood, remember? Associated with low budget films, made very popular, populistic kind of cinema, lapped up by the working class Americans. Some of the earlier films were the Lights of New York, Little Caesar, Public Enemy, Angels with Dirty Faces, The Roaring Twenties, White Heat, and the most popular actors were Edward G. Robinson, James Cagney, and Humphrey Bogart. And then later on we had Al Pacino. Al Pacino, there was a period when he made a career out of playing the essential gangster hero. De Niro, always a gangster. I mean, Al Pacino till, what was that movie with Johnny Depp? Donnie Brasco? Yes, he played a gangster till then, which was late 90s or so. So, what is an iconography? When we were doing semiotics and we discussed 7 semiotics, particularly in relation to 7. So, the idea is that the filmmakers employ certain tropes, certain signs, certain symbols to create an iconography. When we are talking about iconography of a star, we talked about James Dean, how his entire persona conveyed that kind of a youthful energy. That was his iconography. And his films consolidated the kinds of roles he played, they consolidated that persona. So, an icon is created. Yeah. So, gangster hero, iconography of a gangster movie, the charismatic hero who embodies good as well as bad. Remember, an anti-hero has to be an embodiment of both these elements, good as well as bad. He cannot be an out and out negative hero, negative person, not a dark hearted villain who kills for no reason. Generally, it has the dangerous woman. Okay. There is a good woman who is the love interest, mother mostly, yes, especially in our cinema. In Scarface, sister is a very important part of the movie. And if you watch earlier Scarface, even it's there even in Al Pacino's Scarface, but the earlier version, Paul Muni's Scarface, the incest tone is so highlighted that he had strong feelings of attraction towards his sister. The sister becomes an integral feature in most of these films. There is always a mentor. Yes, there is. Okay, think of that way. Okay. The glowing city streets during night time. Watch Public Enemies once more and you will find. Now, the cars, the clothes, the streets. Michael Mann is a master in creating these iconographies. I mean, LA is his space, LA is his city. Exactly. Watch Collateral. Thank you so much. Collateral, Heat. Heat is another heist gangster drama. The spaces are like the nightclubs, the streets, the bars, the restaurants, and the weaponry. Of course, say hello to my little friend, the Scarface. And invariably, all this leading to invariably a very violent climax. It doesn't get more violent than Al Pacino's Scarface. What is the significance of the gangster genre? If you are looking at the overall history of cinema, it brought new vigor and new kind of vitality to the films. Stories became more and more realistic and hard-hitting. Characters became more colorful and varied. So, we no longer had the same goody-goody hero anymore. And very interestingly, language of the streets, you know what I mean, the jargon, the slang, these things found their way in the films. Otherwise, films were very careful about the kind of, it was almost like reading a play or watching a play, that kind of language. But then, we had that kind of language finding its way in cinema. One of the earlier examples of this genre, Scarface, 1932, produced by Howard Hughes and directed by Howard Hawks, starring Paul Muni, scripted by Ben Hecht, along with W.R. Burnett and John Lee Mann. These are the names that you should know. If you are students of film studies, you should know film history. Okay, and based on a pulp novel, this is also why is Tarantino so interested in pulp? Why does he call his best movie Pulp Fiction? He is an avid consumer of pulp fiction, pulp novel, because from pulp we get so much of material, okay? So many so much of detailing of American culture and history and society. Therefore, that is the importance of, so don't be dismissive of pulp. Pulp says a lot of things. It may be low art, low culture, yeah, but it gives you a slice of life. Scarface is rooted in contemporary reality, with people and incidents drawn directly from Chicago gangster history. The other day I was telling you about how Howard Hughes, he didn't want to release Scarface anymore, and it was released only after his death, okay, because he had to fight a long prolonged battle with the censors to release the movie. There is a dialogue in Scarface in 1932 version where he says, "There's only one thing that gets orders and gives orders, and this is it," and indicates his machine gun. And if you watch Al Pacino's version of this, this is exactly the thing he says to his boss. "You giving me order." Okay, watch the movie. Have you watched the movie of late? It's one of my all-time favorite films. He further says, "That's how I got the south side for you, you know, the boroughs in this city, Chicago. And that's how I'm going to get the north side for you." It's a little typewriter, you know, machine gun. A gangster is also an author. Camera is stilo, that is, camera is a pen for a filmmaker. For a writer, it's typewriter. For the gangster, it's his machine gun. You know, punches holes in people. So it's a typewriter. I'm going to write my name all over the town with it. Now, Hays Court, which we have already done. So the release of Scarface, this is very interesting. A movie was almost delayed by a year because the producer Howard Hughes had to battle with the Hays office and regional censor boards. Okay, and the films could no longer show crimes. That's the idea. That's what the court prescribed. And the exact clause was that films cannot show crime in such a way as to throw sympathy with the crime as against law and justice, or to inspire others with a desire for imitation. That's what people say. You know, all the corruption in our society, blame it on the movies, right? There is a murder somewhere, people say. You see, this is the influence of the movies, which could be true to an extent. People watch a movie and they say, "Oh, you know, I learned this scene exactly from a movie." So, films shouldn't show such things which inspire sympathy for the wrongdoer, because it creates a very bad template for the society. So that's the idea, and therefore the producer had to fight a law. And how did they manage to release the movie? Do you know? It's like, you know, cigarettes. A cigarette pack is always accompanied. Today, if you watch a movie where the characters are smoking, what do you see? Scroll running throughout that cigarette smoking causes cancer, and then there is a list of ailments that you are given, not just cancer, but so many things are shown to you. The other day I was watching a movie directed by Sudhir Mishra, Inkar, starring Arjun Rampal, where hero is a media executive, and he's a chain smoker. So for the first 5 or 10 minutes, we were just treated to what happens to your lung and to your body if you smoke too much. I actually thought that I have inserted a wrong DVD. I mean, perhaps, you know, what I bought isn't what I really got. And then it comes, okay, so this is all a part of the film. So because censorship has become so strong. Okay, so that's the way it is, and we have to accept that. How did they get away with Scarface then? It also comes with a statutory warning. You watch that Scarface. Oliver Stone's Al Pacino, Brian De Palma version doesn't come with any statutory warning. Paul Muni version does come, and it tells you very, you know, in a very moralistic tone that crime does not pay.
They wouldn't allow it to be shown in cinema.
Yeah, but do you think that if today you watch a movie like Scarface,
Not today, no.
yeah.
Yeah.
But in the 80s also, I mean, you had all these Rambo movies releasing at the same time. Perhaps, you see, that's the difference. You know, Rambo, in spite of its excessive violence, is a politically correct film. Yeah. What does it tell you? America, Rambo is an out and out and all American good guy, and he's fighting the so-called others, defeating the Vietnamese, the Russians, the Afghans, all the bad people of the world. Okay, and Rambo goes on a killing gun. So I love the spoof what was that, Hot Shot? Yes, with Charlie Sheen. Yeah, so it was a very intelligently, very cleverly done spoof of the film. But Scarface, very realistically done movie. All, of course, it had the stardom of Al Pacino looming large over the movie. So, and Al Pacino is always over the top. He's operatic in his performance. Never the kind of actor who would give in to any underplaying or subtleties. Okay, he is always over the top, and that's part of his charm. Okay, so perhaps the role was enacted in such a way, the performance itself was so powerful. Okay, so, it just overtook the message that crime doesn't pay. I mean, who would bother with that if you could lead a life like Tony Montana? So therefore, perhaps X-ray, the so-called X rating is important for that movie. A result of this prolonged fight between the producer and the censor board was that Hollywood producers, they panicked and embraced the code for self-defense. They said, we will regulate ourselves. The other day we were talking about Notorious and the famous kissing scene. You cannot have a kiss more than 2 or 3 seconds, but then how Hitchcock managed to. So there is always a way around, to do certain things. Now, because the code became so strong and because the producers were so scared to make the kind of movies that they wanted to do, that they just shied away from making the gangster movies, because how do you make a gangster movie without glorifying the hero? You need to do that. You need to use certain kind of language. You need to use certain kind of excesses on screen, and they were not allowed to do that. So what did that lead to? I mean, audiences were ready for this kind of cinema. Okay, they still wanted this kind of cinema, the so-called anti-hero, the dangerous woman, not the goody two-shoes kind of characters anymore. They wanted, so there was an audience, there was a demand. So all this led towards film noir. Okay. Now, noir hero is essentially a cop, a detective, a truth seeker. So you are using the same elements, a dangerous woman, a morally ambivalent hero, but he is no longer the lawbreaker. That's the idea. So therefore, Noah could get away in spite of the very strict code, which the gangster hero couldn't get away with. So there was a lull in all these films about gangster heroes. There was the rise of film noir during the classic Hollywood times. There were certain high concept movies which didn't do well, and then we have already talked about new Hollywood cinema at length. And now, post Vietnam, there was another wave of gangster cinema. Now the code was no longer in existence. Bonnie and Clyde had redefined the rules of censorship, all the existing codes. So what happened? We had films like Bonnie and Clyde, 67, you know the list, the Saint Valentine's Day's Massacre, 1967, Bloody Mama, 1970, Boxcar Bertha, directed by Scorsese, good, 72, Capone, 75, and then of course the mother of all gangster films, The Godfather. And now it has become, the genre is here to stay. So we are talking about a very popular genre which has become a part of all collective consciousness, the gangster hero, and how a gangster movie satisfies most of the requirements of a genre film, a highly recognized, a highly popular kind of cinema, the gangster cinema. So from genre, a fixed category of genre, we will move on to genre blending, the category of genre blending, where the semantics and semiotics are confusing. They send us mixed signals. Okay. We were talking about the signifier and the signified, and we will see how these codes, which so firmly establish identities and categories in generic films. Okay, the same codes are used to defy genres. In films, deliberately seek to defy or blend genres. There are certain fixed categories, genres, and we have seen how gangster satisfies the features of or expectations of a genre. There are certain films like Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone's, which redefined the category, but still all the signifieds and the signifiers are in place. It's just the way plot, conflict and characters are developed in Leone's movie that we find that he is deviating from the genre, but it's still the genre is there. Okay, the purity of the genre remains. He experiments a lot with the way characters are sketched. That's the idea. But when you bend and blend genres, what happens? The semiotics are confusing. Viewers are kept guessing. So, you know, genres are very satisfactory categories. Audiences know what to expect. Here, audience don't know what to expect. Fargo, a pregnant cop, whoever had heard of such a thing. Comic villains, Steve Buscemi playing the kind of role he does so well. And when a filmmaker seeks to bend genre, he is subverting the established conventions and codes of an established genre. Typical examples, Terry Gilliam's Brazil, and it starts very vaguely, somewhere in the 20th century. It blends all the items of a science fiction, a romance, a futuristic kind of a film. It's a war movie, it's a dystopic movie, it's also a satire. My personal favorite is Mars Attacks by, it's a Tim Burton movie. Mars Attacks by Tim Burton. This is one of the rare movies in which we have no Johnny Depp. Okay, yeah, but it defies genre and how. Okay, it has Jack Nicholson, it has Pierce Brosnan, it has Sarah Jessica Parker, it has a host of big time actors, okay, and Glenn Close, but then you see what he does to them, and it's a spoof. Well, you can call it a spoof. At the same time, it's a throwback to all those so-called B movies, the cult movies of the 40s and the 50s. It's very pulpy. We know what Tim Burton is capable of doing. So, it's something like, you know, clearing the path for someone like Tarantino. Because we have had people like Tim Burton, therefore we could have someone like Tarantino. But he came much later after these people, right? So, Men Who Stare at Goats, starring George Clooney, a serious man. All these are standard examples. So, a supreme example of genre bending and genre blending in recent times would be Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, a much loved, much watched movie. Now, let's first talk about Tarantino and why is he so important to us. So, what are the subjects, what are the themes that inform Tarantino's films? He is informed by the works of pulp fiction writers. So, you see the title itself comes, he pays a homage to his favorite writers, Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, James Caan, Raoul Whitfield, Horace McCoy. So, these are no highbrow literateurs, they are out and out massy entertainers, okay, and pulp writers. Crime writers, and this is important, Elmore Leonard, Charles Wilford. Other important influences, Hong Kong action films from the 80s and even the 70s. Okay, what can you mention? Give me examples from some of the movies.
Bruce Lee's films.
Bruce Willis, not Bruce Willis, Bruce Lee's films. Yeah, Hong Kong martial arts. Bruce Lee is the most well known, but there must have been several other lesser known people also. After all, Tarantino worked in a video
Sure.
library
Video
before
store.
making it big. So that's all he did for a living. He would watch movies. Okay, and since he would watch movies, he and all kinds of movies. So he even the title of the film Reservoir Dogs, it has a very interesting history. You know what?
It's
Someone came
Au
to
revoir,
borrow a video from
something,
his
yeah.
video library and asked for a French movie called Au revoir les enfants. It's a French movie, and the owner, who understood or spoke very little French, he said, "I have no Reservoir Dogs." Okay, and Tarantino liked the exchange, and it remained with him, and later on he used it as a title for his very first film. That's simple. So he gets his material and his inspiration from all over the place. Okay. Another major influence on Tarantino is blaxploitation cinema of the 70s. It's a subgenre. Blaxploitation is a subgenre of the B movies, so-called B movies, action flicks, basically centered on the black people, the black citizens, especially in the urban settings. The highest film genre, so cinema of Jean Melville, the French filmmaker who made a film like Bob the Flambeur. So that was a major influence, the highest cinema, and therefore you can see that in Reservoir Dogs. The girl gang movies and Death Proof is a very good example of the girl gang kind of films. Yes, the 60s Western, the spaghetti version of the Western movies. The B flicks, he's not looking at the John Wayne kind of Westerns, more the spaghetti and the B Westerns. Horror films, slasher films, that's another very popular. I mean, in Kill Bill, he goes all the way. You have the heroine just taking off somebody's eye and chopping off an arm. So with so much of relish, and the blood just flows. It's free flowing all over the place, gushes out like a fountain. Vigilante movies of the 70s, think of Dirty Harry. Okay, so go ahead, make my day. Those smart one-liners, a tough street hero, vigilante films. And most of the television programs from the 60s to the 90s. The kind of cultural references, especially references from the popular culture he makes, is astounding. And people have written books on that. How much of television he must have watched and the kind of influences that he has gathered and imbibed, and all these things are reflected in his film. And does he have a genre? People have given his brand of cinema its title, and it's called Tarantinesque. There is he defies genre. Do you agree? Yeah. So if he makes a gangster's film, you know what he is going to do. So salient features, what makes his cinema so special? His influences are enormous. So his film basically, and if there are features, then we can categorize them. So his kind of cinema basically hinges on a world of masculine codes of violence. He is immensely influenced by the masculine codes of violence as seen in the movies of someone like Sam Peckinpah, who made Straw Dogs, with Dustin Hoffman, which was recently remade. I guess so, and it didn't do well at all. If you watch the Peckinpah version of Straw Dogs, it's so hard hitting. And also Peckinpah's Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia and The Wild Bunch. Another recurring theme is betrayal between friends in Tarantino. Men on a mission, let's go to work. That's the tagline of Reservoir Dogs. Let's get into character. That's the tagline of Pulp Fiction. His films deal with rituals and codes of criminals, yes. There are lengthy dialogues. It's almost like paying homage to the cinema of Godard, where people talk and talk and lovers talk in close apartments, and some of the exchanges run into 20 minutes or so. And then in-depth discussions of pop culture. So, what is pulp fiction? Originally, pulp was a kind of material, the printed kind of literature, lowbrow literature, printed on cheap wood pulp paper, successor to something called penny dreadfuls and dime novels, which you can buy for a dime or a penny, not very expensive, cheaply available, accessible. So, pulp afforded entertainment to working class people. Therefore, the word pulp, mostly an American phenomenon, featuring the hua pola and dealing with the lurid, sensational, titillating aspects of life. And some of the recurring themes in pulp was adultery, intrigue, and then you had street smart secretaries, mostly females, lots of murder and lots of sex. That is what you find in Tarantino's Pulp Fiction as well. So, please do watch Pulp Fiction, and then we will be discussing how Pulp Fiction satisfies all the conditions of genre bending and blending. Thank you very much.